In this video tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use triggers and events. With triggers and events, you can take your digital signage presentation and customize it with a special behavior to accommodate your particular solution. For example, if you wanted to have your audience click the screen and make selections, and at the same time wanted to create an analytics report so you'll know how many customers clicked on a particular link, you could set up an HTTP post on a web server using triggers and events. Or if you wanted to turn on a light and change the timeline when a visitor comes to your store, or maybe spin a motor every time a particular resource plays on the timeline, that could easily be achieved with triggers and events. So essentially, triggers and events allow you to create cause and effect scenarios that can affect both your presentation as well as interact with the real world. Now, when it comes to triggers, you can set triggers on a click when a particular timeline or block loads. You can set an HTTP post that comes from the outside, so this can be received by the signage player and again interact on that. And you can also send triggers from JavaScript and ActionScript, and I'll show you that. And then you can listen to events. You can change a collection, change a timeline, set a particular text and a label. So I'll show you how to configure triggers and events. One last thing I wanted to mention before we start is that we do have other video tutorials that focus on particular sections of events. For example, the collection talks about events in correlation to the actual collection. We have a video tutorial on remote touch and remote pad. So ultimately, the objective of this course is to give you an overview of triggers and events, but if you wanted a more in-depth knowledge of a particular section, be sure to check out the video tutorial for that. So let's begin. Now, I know it may sound complicated, triggers and events, but it's really not. It's a very, very simple concept. So let me go ahead and explain this to you. The way it works is this. We'll configure a label, and when you click on this particular label, we're going to fire an event. An event is nothing more than just a string, and you can make up any string you want. And so we just came up with event 1. And so when a person clicks on label click, event 1 will be triggered. And then we'll set up two collections that will listen to this event 1. One collection will move forward in the items, and one collection will move back with the items that it holds. So that's really all that we're doing. We are triggering events, and we're listening to these events and acting upon them. And like I mentioned, you can even listen to events at the campaign level. And so, for example, if we configure the campaign to listen to the same event, event 1, we can set it to, for example, run a particular script. Or for example, we can have an HTTP post done at the campaign level, and all this is easily configurable. So let's go ahead and set this up. So in order to save you some time, I went ahead and set everything up. So I'll go ahead and show you. I have two collections over here on channel 3 and channel 1, and I have a scene over here, just a good old scene, nothing special about it, and it just has a label right here on the lower corner with a click, which is basically just a label, nothing special about that either. We'll switch over to our scene editor to look at the scene I've created, and here's the label right over here, click. Now if I select this particular label and then I go to its properties and go to definition, you can see that I can fire an event, trigger an event anytime we click on this particular label. So we're just going to fire a string called event 1. Again, this could be anything you want. Switch back to our timelines, switch back to our first collection. And I've already dragged and dropped a few resources, just some images, and then go to events, add event 1, and anytime event 1 is captured, we're going to go to next page, basically flip through these items, and then go to collection 2. Again, we have some items which are just resources or images, event 2, or rather event 1, and go previous page. So the action will be to go to the previous page on event 1 on this collection and go to the next page on this collection. Okay, let's go ahead and make a little bit more room here. Click on play. We can see the image. If I click on it, you can see that one collection goes previous and one collection goes next. That's it, as simple as that. Firing event and capturing the event. And as I mentioned earlier, you can listen to the same event at different places. For example, we can also listen to the same event at the campaign level. So if I select the campaign, click on the events tab, and over here again events, and go ahead and click on the plus sign to add a custom event. And again, we're just going to be listening to the same event, event 1. We can select the timeline. So in this case, we're going to select timeline 2. Let's go ahead and test this out. And you'll notice that as soon as I click on the button right here, we're going to switch over to timeline 2. And there you go, you see the resources now. You could, for example, also tell it to stay on this particular timeline forever until we receive another event, or automatically resume to the next sequence timeline when this timeline is over. So these are the options you can select over here. You can also tell it to resume presentation, or my personal favorite is right here, which is the post. Now this is extremely powerful because you can actually post information to a remote server. So you can say that anytime event 1 is received, you'll know that somebody clicked on the actual button, the label, and you can, for example, post some data to an external server. Now, the reason why this is so powerful is because you can, for example, collect analytics and post them to a remote database. Or, for example, if you wanted to turn on a light using Arduino or Vera, which we support through Internet of Things, you can post to the remote web server and then the light will turn on. And so the post gives you a simple way to interact with services outside the digital signage presentation. So now that you know that you can actually send information outside the presentation to remote web servers, what about sending information from external sources onto the presentation? Well, that also can be done very easily. Switch over to stations, select the station that you want to send information to or inject into. Go ahead and set up the lens server, make sure it's enabled, and just you can refresh over here to get its local IP address and the port number, and click on File Save to save the configuration. That's really all you need to do to be able to set up a lens server so it can actually receive post commands from the outside. So you can see that I have my presentation running over here, and if I click on the label, we're kind of flipping through the different collection through event 1 as I've set up earlier. But the really nice thing is that if I pull up a command line, I can also set up a curl command, which is nothing more than just a post. And you can see that I'm posting to the IP address and the port as I showed you earlier, because I've set up this particular station as a LAN server, and I'm sending it send local event and then question event name event 1. Well, sure enough, this is the event that we've configured. So essentially what we're doing is we're injecting event 1 into the presentation from the outside. So we can press on enter, and now you can see that we are doing basically the same thing. We are controlling the presentation as if somebody's clicking on the label, but we're doing it from the outside. We're using a curl or a post command. So we can open up a web browser. You can do this via JavaScript. So now, for example, if somebody walks to the door, you can have a sensor send a post to the signage presentation, and you can, for example, turn the light or welcome your customer and so on. So I've demonstrated how to listen to events, as well as how to trigger events both from the presentation as well as from the outside using post. Next, I'm going to show you how to actually control a particular label from the outside. In this case, we're going to do a post command and control this click. So instead of saying click, we'll be able to change the text over here. So I'm back in the Signage Studio. I'm going to go to my scene editor, go back to my label, and confirm that over here under events, I'm going to listen also to event 1 like before, but this time I'm going to make sure that I set param. In other words, what's going to happen is that when I listen to the event using the post command, that will actually go into the event 1 and therefore would go into the label because this set param command. So let's go ahead and save our work. So now, just like before, we're going to send a curl post command to the address of the LAN server, our signage player, the port number and the IP address, send local event question mark event name equals event 1, because again this is our event name. But now we're using this special event param equals and then just a string. Go ahead and press enter, and sure enough we are firing this event called event 1. Maybe now let's say 1 2 3, enter, and you can see that we can change the label from a curl post command using the set param. So I've demonstrated how to trigger the event 1 using both a post command as well as a click. Another neat feature is to trigger the event 1 when a particular timeline or particular resource or block loads on the timeline. So for example, if we go ahead and make a little room here, take a Swift, put the Swift here, double click to load up its properties, you'll see that we have an option right here on the definition to also send an event when this particular resource plays. So we can say right here, again, this is the interactive that I showed you when you actually want to click on that resource. So we don't want to do that, but we actually want to click over here, send a begin event. So we can say every time that this resource plays on the timeline or begins playing on the timeline, we're going to fire this event. We can also say that every time this resource ends on the timeline, we also are going to fire the event. And of course, other modules could be listening to this event 1 and act upon it. So again, just like I explained, if for example you want to turn on a light at your store, or if you want to send a post command in a particular area of the presentation, and this option is available throughout the system. So if for example you select the timeline, you'll notice that just like before, You can go over here on the timeline and you can send a begin and an event even at the level of the timeline. So if, for example, we go and play timeline 2 and then go back and play timeline 1 through the sequences, then every time this timeline will kick in, an event will be fired. You can also, of course, do this through the scheduler. Every time a timeline kicks in because it's a certain time or certain date, again, an event can be fired. And so I've just demonstrated a third way that you can fire events. Another way that you can do this is via JavaScript. We have right here example, digitalsignage.com, Arduino, web commands .html. This is just a simple JavaScript that you guys can use to send commands, and I just went ahead and sent event LED off and on. But you guys can look at the source code over here, and you can modify this to event whatever you want. Again, this would just change to event 1, and you could send whatever event you want. You would also need to use your username and password for the account. So obviously there's going to be some authentication that needs to be taking place. So you need to provide your Signage Studio username and password and your station ID. You'll grab the station ID from over here, go to stations, and you'll have your station ID over here, 48. And so you'll enter this station ID right over here. So to demonstrate this really quick, I'm going to go back to my collection over here. I'm just going to use just my first collection, save my work. I have my username over here and my password and my station ID, and go ahead and bring my browser in so you guys can see it. And remember, I just changed this collection over here. I'm going to send an LED on event, and you can see that it's switching again only this one collection because that's the only one that I changed from event 1 to LED on string event. So that was really simple to set up as well. Now, one last thing I wanted to show you is the ability to listen to events programmatically and act upon these events. So what we'll do is go over here to navigation. We actually support ActionScript 3, and you can see that I have script 2 over here, which is a simple script with the function called function1 or F1, very simple script that has one function that receives a value and then send event, which again should look familiar. We're just sending an event with event 1, which is our event for the label, and we're passing in the value that we received to the function. So let's go ahead and test this real quick. First we'll compile. So click over here to compile, and it build succeeded. We're just going to call F1 and pass it 1, 2, 3 and run it, and you can see that it works fine. Next, what we'll do is we'll switch over here back to our campaigns. Go to our campaign label, select it, go to script and assign it. So script 2 is now assigned to our campaign. Next, we're going to go back to events. And now we're going to go ahead and set up a new event called event 2. And essentially what we're saying is that every time we receive event 2, we are going to run F1, our function 1, in the script. And we're not going to do anything else, just run the function. Also, if we pass any values to event 2, these values will get passed into F1 and therefore would get passed into this function and called. So let's go ahead and save our work. So over here in the presentation, just like before, we are going to run this curl command, but notice that now I'm sending actually event 2. I'm not sending event 1 like before. Instead, I'm sending event 2. So this event 2 is again configured at the campaign level, and it'll go ahead and call our function 1, and the value will be passed into our function 1, our F1. So we'll go ahead and say F1 because we are passing some value into F1. It's actually on timeline 2 right now, so we'll wait for it to switch back to timeline 1. Okay, so it's back. Let's go ahead and press enter. And you can see that our value changes. So we were able to call our function and pass a parameter to it. So this wraps up this video tutorial. Again, if you want more information on the collection or remote touch, remote pad, Internet of Things, scripting, all these are presented as separate video tutorials, so you can watch them to learn more about these modules. Thank you for the time, and I hope you enjoy this.